Back at it again with the Mobius Dickus, Chapter 33, The Speck Snyder. For me, this chapter is a short one, and it is the start of a pairing of chapters between this and 34, which start to ask interesting questions about where is the origin or source of power? How does power exercise itself? Where does power come from? How does it work? And I think in the final paragraph of this chapter, we get a very interesting comment from Ishmael on both Ahab with his general mystery and kind of aura of weirdness and how that intersects with power. So let's start at the top. Nor perhaps will it fail to be eventually perceived that behind those forms and usages, as it were, he sometimes masked himself, incidentally making use of them for other and more private ends than they were legitimately intended to subserve. So he's talking about the kind of odd and kind of mysterious things that Ahab does in order to make himself look a bit mysterious. That certain sultanism of his brain, which had otherwise in a good degree remained unmanifested, through those forms that same sultanism became incarnate in an irresistible dictatorship. Okay, so apparently Ahab exerts this really powerful magnetic effect. For be a man's intellectual superiority what it will, it can never assume the practical available supremacy over other men without the aid of some sort of external arts and entrenchments, always in themselves more or less paltry and base. So what Ishmael is asserting is that for people to take someone seriously and to be subservient to them or to feel that they have more power than them, actual capacity can actually matter less than appearance, right? That perception plays a huge role in how people see power. This is it. That forever keeps God's true princes of the empire from the world's hustings, and hustings are meetings at which candidates in an election address potential voters. So it's the external arts and entrenchments that are paltry and base that keeps people who are in power from having to reassert why they deserve to be in power. It leaves the highest honors that this air can give to those men who become famous more through their infinite inferiority to the choice hidden handful of the divine inert than through their undoubted superiority over the dead level of the mass. So this sentence seems to imply that what keeps people in power is that most people, or rather, not most people, but there's a few choice people who are actually talented. But these people who are powerful are inferior to those people. They're just superior to the dead level of the mass because they are masters at this external art and entrenchment. So let's give a concrete example. Why does, let me pick on someone here, why does take your pick of Instagram model have more followers than someone who is actually really smart or actually doing really good things in the world? Well, it's because it's these external art and a capability of making oneself seem important that makes someone important, not someone's actual skill. You have to be a good showman to stay in power. And being a good showman is actually less about competence than one would think. You can apply this to political situations in contemporary America as you wish. Such large virtue lurks in these small things when extreme political superstitions invest them, that in some royal instances, even to idiot imbecility, they have imparted potency. So that's a historical reference to many, hereditary monarchs who have sucked at their job, but they still have their power because they perform the rituals and tasks that create the perception of power and fame, as opposed to the actuality of competence. But when, as in the case of Nicholas the Tsar, the ringed crown of geographical empire encircles an imperial brain, then the plebeian herds crouch abased before the tremendous centralization. So, according to Ishmael, Nicholas the Tsar, I assume he means Nicholas the First, is, obviously based on timeline, he means Nicholas the First, is the best example of someone who is actually competent and combined that competency with the rituals and trappings of fame and power, so that it becomes something which makes the plebeian or the regular or common people really crouch abased. Nor will the tragic dramatist who would depict mortal indomitableness in its fullest sweep and direct swing ever forget a hint incidentally so important in his art as the one now alluded to. So if someone were to paint the picture of or write a story of someone who has the same kind of truly impressive public perception, they will not fail to pick up on, Ishmael says, the fact that this depends on both the combination of competency with the appearance and trappings of mystery and ritual. But Ahab, my captain, still moves before me in all his Nantucket grimness and shagginess, and in this episode touching emperors and kings, I must not conceal that I have only to do with a poor old whale hunter like him, and therefore all outward majestical trappings and housings are denied me. O Ahab, what shall be grand in thee? It must needs be plucked at from the skies and dived for in the deep and featured in the unbodied air. So Ishmael is kind of, praising Ahab here, saying, even though I just spent a paragraph talking about how oftentimes people are respected for the wrong things, for ritual and mystery rather than competence, because Ahab, even though he comes off as mysterious, is just a whale ship man. He doesn't have all the trappings of a king or a prince. His power, his control must be based in something deeper and more spiritual and more elemental than the trappings and ritual of mystery. This seemingly contradicts the descriptions that we got within this chapter, which is classic Melville. So Ahab is framed as both someone who depends on mystery and ritual and weirdness to maintain his power, and also someone who's actually got that core inner competence that we talk about with Nicholas the Tsar that makes people interested and scared of him. So that's an interesting preliminary discussion of where power derives from, which will be continued in the next chapter, chapter 34.